हेलो एंड वेलकम। आपका स्वागत है इस फाइनेंस शो में जिसका नाम है बैंकर से चर्चा विद आशीष कपूर। Today we will talk about an important but relatively less appreciated investment avenue, that's exchange traded funds or ETFs, which in fact were first introduced in India way back in the financial year 2002 by an asset management company called Benchmark AMC. To understand more about the evolution and nuances of ETFs, it is my pleasure to host our special guest and SEBI-registered RIA founder, Shri Himanshu Pandya. Welcome back to the BankerSeCharcha Vodcast, Himanshu.
Thanks for having me, Ashish.
To start things off, Himanshu, could you describe in simple terms what exactly are these exchange-traded funds from the perspective actually of a first-timer or let's say new-to-market retail investor?
Well, exchange-traded funds are a little advancement on conventional mutual funds. Basically, when we talk about conventional mutual funds, you try to take exposure to a basket of securities through a regulated vehicle, which is transparent and is professionally managed. And it allows you to take exposure to a certain asset class or a sub-asset class through that vehicle. So mutual fund is that vehicle. ETF is a type of mutual fund. In fact, it is a special type of mutual fund in the sense that it is a mutual fund which is traded on exchange. Okay, most of the mutual funds are not traded on exchange, but those which are ETFs are traded on exchange, and therefore they provide you real-time liquidity, which means that investors can purchase and sell on the same day in the markets, right? Now, you would ask, why would a long-term investor be too worried about ETFs? Anyways, you're a long-term investor. Well, you're right. It may not matter for long-term investors immediately, except when you look at other parameters like cost of a fund, like liquidity of a fund. And that is where ETFs have an advantage. Notwithstanding that, it is extremely powerful tool for people who want to take exposure to large asset classes in a low-cost manner and in an efficient manner with the same tax advantages as associated with mutual funds. So it is a sophisticated mutual fund.
Great, thanks for that. Very well articulated, Himanshu. So what would you say are some of the key benefits, key advantages of ETFs over the regular mutual funds? Let's say from not so much from the bond side, but stock ETF perspective.
Well, the first and the foremost is what we call a passive exposure to an asset class. As the world gets more sophisticated in India, investors are looking not just for active fund managers who are expected to provide outperformance, but also beta exposure or simple market exposure without appointing any fund manager essentially. Now, ETFs give you first an exposure to a sub-asset class. Second, they are extremely low cost. You will be surprised to know that some of the ETFs that are traded, and they are very large, diversified ETFs on the market, are at 0.03% a year or 0.04% a year, as compared to a same large cap mutual fund, which is comparable, which could be as high as 2.5% to the end investor. So you see the gap, right? It's a huge gap. And that is one. Second important thing is that they are professionally managed and well regulated, right? They are all regulated under SEBI. So how they are valued, how they are traded, the liquidity, the regulations they follow are very tight. And that is good for a retail investor who is not a first-hand stock market player. The third and the most important is that now ETFs come in even more sophisticated version by ways called smart beta ETFs. And smart beta ETFs are like special cases of ETFs where the basket of securities are selected basis quantitative algorithms or quantitative factors. Now, how are you going to do that as an individual investor? You cannot. And therefore, smart beta ETFs provide a very effective tool to gain access to all different schools of investment management that have evolved over the last 2 decades.
Right. Thanks for crisply outlining the key benefits and nuances, Himanshu. Could you also take us through, the evolution, how ETFs have evolved in India over the last couple of decades since their debut in 2002? In terms of sophistication, you already spoke about smart beta, ETFs, as well as the product range. If you can just, guide us on that.
The evolution has been slow, gradual, and it has not suddenly come on the horizon overnight. Okay.
Right.
So, as you rightly mentioned, they are nearly 2 decades plus old in the system. And as you rightly pointed out, Benchmark was the first entity who brought out the ETF, which was subsequently taken by Goldman Sachs and then subsequently by Nippon. And today's there is a product called Nippon India Nifty Bees. It is a product which is now having 2 decades plus track record. And it's very low cost, very well managed. But if you go back 20 years, ETFs took the first decade, ETFs practically did not move. They were just an idea. The ecosystem was not ready for that. The market makers were not around. Liquidity was not around. But slowly and gradually, more and more asset managers entered the market. So the likes of ICICI Prudential, the likes of Mirae Asset, the likes of State Bank of SBI Mutual Fund, the likes of UTI Mutual Fund, the likes of Navi, these are entities which came into the market. And as more competitors entered the market, the first thing they recognized is that this is a smart way of taking exposure to beta or market performance. And therefore, this is going to be very relevant. Even if, as they saw globally, ETFs became larger and larger and larger. Right? Today, they are almost 1/3 to 1/2 of the total market, depending on which market you're looking at in the Western world. India is all set to get into this. And the ecosystem now is far more sophisticated. The regulator recognizes that this is a very good way for retail investors to take exposure. I think the moment of alpha came for ETFs when EPFO money, Employee Provident Fund Organization, who we all trust that organization blindly, right? It is sovereign backed. It manages our pension money. When they chose to invest in ETFs, suddenly there was a recognition of the concept. Right. Today, SBI ETF is the largest ETF in the country. UTI ETFs are the large ETFs in the country. And that gives a big thumbs up. Now, because people's pension monies are getting managed under ETF, you would expect it to be very tightly regulated, which they are. Slowly but gradually, the number of ETFs increased, the variety of ETFs increased, the type of exposure they provide increased. Not just the large cap, but now you have mid cap and small cap and fixed income and smart beta and foreign ETFs, right? All this on your platter. So this is a very deep ecosystem now, but I would still say we are far away from the Western world, but we are going to get there.
Right. काफी wide portfolio hai to select from, isn't it? So would you say absolutely right? So would you say that depending on an individual's objectives and risk appetite, retail investors need to mindfully learn, how to make informed decision choices from amongst the vast range of ETF vehicles, besides all the other market products which are available?
I would say that if you are not a first-hand market player, okay, which means equity, stocks, and investments being your primary profession, right, then you should take help, first of all. Second, the person who is supposed to help you, the advisor or whoever it is, should treat ETF as one of the weapons in the armory. ETF is not the only thing, isn't it? Yes. So you have sophisticated mutual funds. You can take REITs and REITs. You can take gold. There are so many things to construct a portfolio. But in certain places, ETFs today rule the roost as compared to the other vehicles. Now, whichever are the asset classes where ETFs play a very dominant role now and the role of a leader, those exposures should be taken by ETFs. And whichever are those areas where even today active fund managers have a significant advantage. And there are certain product advantages, like in case of hybrid mutual funds. Like there are certain cases where there are exposures of other kind, like private markets or credit, etc. There are different vehicles available. So you should use ETFs in those segments where ETFs are dominant today. Not everywhere ETFs are the bosses, but there are places where nobody can beat ETFs. For example, the conventional India large cap exposure. I think today, if you want to take large cap exposure in India, ETFs are the best, period.
Great. So you mentioned about advisors. I wanted to ask you, how can RIAs, help the busy professionals and businessmen or businesswomen of today to give direction not just to their immediate investment objectives, but also help in their larger, long-term wealth creation journey?
Well, let me start it in this way, Ashish. Investing is not something you learn by reading books or watching videos. Investment is something you do and learn and do and learn, right? It is similar to spirituality, for example, or muscle building, for example.
Right.
You don't just start watching a video and doing it, right? So it is very important in all these arenas where the way to learn is to do it. In all these arenas, it is important to have somebody who has been there before you. It gives you a significant leg up, right? They are the people who have been in the markets for long. They understand these products, these strategies, the tactics that will help you on a certain path. I don't mean to say that you should not know about investments and trust somebody blindly. But even if you are an expert, it is significant advantage to have somebody who is looking at your portfolio objectively, in sync with your objectives, and protects your portfolio from your own emotional gyrations.
Yeah, no, that's a very, very important point. Yeah. So that's all for today. Thank you so much, Himanshu, for sharing those words of wealth wisdom. Really appreciate that you took out time to explain and demystify the concept of ETF, which I'm sure will be appreciated by almost all professionals and students alike. Thank you. आपका बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद.
Thank you, Ashish. Thank you so much.
आज के लिए इतना ही दोस्तों. आशा करता हूँ कि आपको ये चर्चा पसंद आई. आप इस वीडियो को शेयर करें, लाइक करें और चैनल को सब्सक्राइब करें ताकि आने वाले कोई भी वीडियोस आपसे मिस ना हो जाएं. अगले एपिसोड में फिर आपसे मुलाकात होगी एक नए चर्चे पर, एक नए विषय पर. तब तक के लिए धन्यवाद, शुक्रिया, आभार, थैंक यू, जय हिंद.
Thank you.